Officer Trent Maddox saw the grey hair, the trembling hands, and the cane, and assumed he had found a victim rather than an opponent. He chuckled with cruel satisfaction as he snapped those handcuffs onto her arthritic wrists, mocking the elderly woman's pleas for dignity. But he had misread the situation completely. That trembling was not fear. It was rage, and the contact named Knox she dialed on her shattered phone screen was not a worried neighbor or a public defender. He was Major Knox Whittaker, a Tier 1 Delta Force operator currently on leave, and he was minutes away. What happened next was not just a rescue. It was a systematic dismantling of corruption that would bring the entire city to its knees. This is the story of how one arrogant badge messed with the wrong mother. The hydrangeas were thirsty. That was the only thing on Edna Mae Whittaker's mind as she stepped off her porch, the wooden steps creaking familiarly under her weight. Edna moved with a deliberate, rhythmic slowness, her movements dictated by the weather in her joints. Today, the humidity in the North Carolina air was thick, promising a storm later in the afternoon. But for now, the morning sun was golden and deceptive. She adjusted her straw hat, the one with the frayed blue ribbon she had worn since her husband Silas passed some years ago. The neighborhood of Oak Creek had changed since then. The small, modest brick bungalows that once housed factory workers and school teachers were slowly being bought up, knocked down, and replaced with towering modern boxes of glass and grey siding. The faces were changing too. There were fewer porch sitters these days, fewer waves from across the street. But Edna remained. She was a fixture, rooted as deeply as the ancient oak tree that shaded her driveway. Edna reached for the garden hose, her knuckles swollen and knotted. She hummed a low gospel tune, "Precious Lord, take my hand," as the water sputtered and then flowed clear. She was watering the roots, careful not to wet the leaves, just as her father had taught her decades ago. The silence of the street was sliced open by the low guttural growl of an engine. Edna did not look up immediately. Cars drove too fast down Elm Street all the time. But the growl slowed, transforming into the distinct idle purr of a police cruiser. The tires crunched gravel as the vehicle pulled partially into her driveway, blocking the path to the mailbox. Edna straightened up, wiping her hands on her floral apron. She squinted against the sun. It was a black and white SUV, the emblem of the Metro Police Department emblazoned on the side. Two doors opened. From the driver's side emerged Officer Trent Maddox. He was a man who carried his weight in his chest and shoulders, a physique that had once been muscular, but was now softening into doughy aggression. He wore his sunglasses on the back of his shaved head, and his thumbs were already hooked into his tactical vest. He looked like a man who was bored and looking for a reason not to be. From the passenger side came a younger man, Officer Dylan Hayes. He looked barely out of the academy, his uniform crisp and ill-fitting, his eyes darting nervously toward the houses across the street. "Morning," Edna called out, her voice raspy but polite. She believed in manners even when others did not. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Maddox did not answer immediately. He walked halfway up the driveway, chewing on a piece of gum with an open mouth. He stopped near the azaleas, looking her up and down with a gaze that felt like a physical shove. "You live here?" Maddox asked, the accusation disguised as a question. Edna stiffened. "I've lived here for many years, officer. My name is on the deed and the mailbox." Maddox smirked, a quick, humorless twitch of his lips. "We've had reports." "Reports?" Edna frowned, turning off the nozzle of the hose. "Reports of what?" "Excessive gardening, loitering, Maddox said, taking another step forward. Suspicious activity, potential casing of the property. Edna let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Casing the property, officer? I'm watering my own flowers. I have the key to the front door in my pocket. So you say, Maddox said, his voice dropping an octave and becoming harder. But we've had a string of break-ins in this new development area, and you fit the description of a suspect seen looking into windows yesterday. Suspect? Edna's heart began to hammer a warning rhythm against her ribs. An elderly woman with a cane and a bad hip is hopping fences and peeking in windows. You cannot be serious. Let's see some ID, Maddox demanded, extending a hand. I don't carry my purse when I'm watering the hydrangeas, Edna said, her dignity hardening into steel. It's inside. If you want to wait, I can go get it. Or better yet, you can ask Mrs. Hargrove next door. She's known me for many years. I'm not asking the neighbors, and I'm not letting you go inside to retrieve a weapon, Maddox snapped. He unhooked the thumb brake on his holster, not drawing the gun, but resting his hand on it. The threat was clear. Officer Maddox, the younger cop, Hayes, piped up from the back. His voice wavered. She looks like she lives here, man. Look at the pictures on the porch. That's her in the photos. Maddox whipped his head around. Shut it, Hayes. I'm training you on situational awareness. Suspects lie. They use props. Secure the perimeter. Maddox turned back to Edna. The air between them crackled. Edna Whittaker had raised 3 boys. She had buried a husband. She had worked for decades as a registered nurse in the trauma ward of chaos. She did not fear blood, and she did not fear bullies. Get off my property, Edna said. Her voice was quiet, trembling not with fear, but with the effort of control. You have no warrant. You have no cause. You are harassing an old woman. Maddox's face turned a mottled shade of red. He was not used to compliance issues from people who looked like Edna. He stepped into her personal space, the smell of stale coffee and aggression radiating off him. You are failing to identify, Maddox barked, and you are resisting a lawful order. Turn around, hands behind your back. For what? Edna cried out, stepping back, her heel catching on the garden hose. For watering my flowers? For disorderly conduct and failure to comply, Maddox shouted. He lunged. The contact was shocking in its violence. Maddox did not just grab her, he seized her. His large, calloused hand wrapped around Edna's upper arm, squeezing tight enough to bruise the thin, papery skin instantly. Hey! Edna screamed, the sound tearing from her throat, raw and terrified. Let me go. You're hurting me. Stop. Stop resisting, Maddox roared, spinning her around with force that would have been excessive for a linebacker, let alone a grandmother. Edna's cane clattered to the concrete driveway, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Without the support, her bad hip buckled. She began to fall, but Maddox yanked her upward by her arm, wrenching her shoulder socket with a sickening pop. Please, Edna gasped, tears springing to her eyes from the sharp, white-hot pain shooting down her arm. My arm! It's dislocated! Get on the ground! Maddox ignored her plea, sweeping her legs out from under her. Edna hit the concrete hard. The impact knocked the wind out of her. Her cheek scraped against the rough gravel of the driveway, grit embedding into her skin. The world spun dizzily, blue sky, green leaves, grey concrete, black boots. Maddox, stop! Hayes shouted, rushing forward. She's an old lady, for God's sake! Back off, Hayes! Maddox yelled over his shoulder, pressing his knee into the small of Edna's back. The weight was crushing. Edna wheezed, struggling to draw breath into her compressed lungs. She reached for her waistband. You saw it? I didn't see anything, Hayes argued, panic rising in his voice. But he did not physically intervene. He stood there, paralyzed by the hierarchy of the badge, watching a crime unfold in slow motion. Maddox grabbed Edna's wrists. She had arthritis in both hands, her fingers permanently slightly curled. He forced them together behind her back, twisting them at an unnatural angle. "You're breaking them," Edna whimpered, her face pressed into the dirt. "Oh God, you're breaking them." Click, click. The handcuffs bit into her wrists, too tight. Maddox yanked her up by the chain of the cuffs, forcing her to her knees. Edna cried out, a sound of pure agony that pierced the quiet Sunday morning. That scream woke up the street. Doors flew open. Mrs. Hargrove, the elderly neighbor, came out in her bathrobe. A young couple from the new modern house across the street ran out, phones already raised. "What are you doing to her?" Mrs. Hargrove shrieked, shuffling as fast as she could toward the driveway. "That's Edna. She's the head of the church choir. Get off her. Back up. Police business," Maddox shouted, pointing a finger at the gathering crowd. He was sweating now, the adrenaline of the assault mixing with the realization that he had an audience. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. It was the bully's instinct. "She attacked an officer," Maddox lied, his voice loud enough for the cameras. "She is under arrest." Edna knelt on her own driveway, dust on her Sunday dress, blood trickling from a scrape on her cheek. She felt humiliated. She felt small. But beneath the pain, the old steel of the Whittaker bloodline began to cool and harden. She looked up at Hayes, the rookie. He was pale, shaking. "Son," she whispered, her voice cracking, "check my pocket." "What?" Hayes blinked, startled. "My apron pocket," she rasped. "My phone. I have a right to make a call." "You can make a call at the station," Maddox sneered, dragging her toward the cruiser. "No." Edna planted her knees, refusing to move. The neighbors were shouting louder now. "I know my rights. You are detaining me on private property without a warrant. I have a right to notify my family before you take me anywhere, unless you want a kidnapping charge added to your lawsuit." It was a bluff, legally speaking, but the word lawsuit and the growing crowd of recording iPhones made Maddox pause. He knew the optics were bad. If he let her make a call, maybe it would de-escalate the mob forming on the sidewalk. He assumed she would call a crying daughter or a local public defender who would not pick up on a Sunday. "Fine," Maddox spat. He reached into her apron, pulled out an old, cracked smartphone, and unlocked it. She did not use a passcode. He held it to her ear, mocking her. "Make it quick, Grandma. Tell him to bring bail money." Edna did not scroll through her contacts. She did not need to look up the number. It was on speed dial number 1. She leaned her head toward the phone Maddox held. Her eyes closed as the line rang. 1 ring, 2 rings. "Mom?" The voice on the other end was clear, alert, and instantly worried. It was not a sleepy Sunday voice. It was a voice that was always ready. "Knox," Edna Mae said, her voice breaking for the first time. "Knox, baby." "Mom, what's wrong? Why do you sound like that?" The shift in tone was instantaneous, from son to soldier. "I'm at home, Knox. There's a policeman, Officer Maddox, badge number 492, and Hayes." "What did they do?" The voice on the phone went cold, ice cold. "What did they do?" "He hurt me, baby. He threw me down, my arm. I think my arm is bad. They have me in cuffs in the driveway." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was not an empty silence. It was a terrifying, loaded silence, the sound of a predator calculating the distance to its prey. "Are you safe right now? Are they still touching you?" "He's holding the phone. He's standing over me." "Okay," Knox said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Mom, listen to me. Do not say another word. Do not resist. I am on my way. I was at the gym on 4th. I'm coming." "Knox, don't do anything crazy," she whispered. "I won't," Knox promised. "I'm going to do everything exactly by the book. Put him on." "What?" "Put the officer on the phone." Edna looked at Maddox. "He wants to talk to you." Maddox laughed, a cruel barking sound. He pulled the phone back to his own ear. "Yeah, who is this? The grandson? Listen here, pal. Your grandma's going to jail for assaulting." "This is Major Knox Whittaker, United States Army Delta Force. I'm currently on terminal leave, but I retain full active status. You are currently violating the civil rights of a dependent of a Tier 1 operator. If you move her 1 inch from that driveway before I arrive, I will consider it an act of kidnapping, and I will use necessary force to interdict. Do you understand me?" Maddox blinked. He looked at the phone, then down at the old woman. He rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure. And I'm the King of England. Tell it to the judge. G.I. Joe." Maddox hung up the phone. He tossed it onto the grass. "Load her up," he ordered Hayes. "But he said..." Hayes stammered. "He's a liar," Maddox said, grabbing Edna by the arm again. "Just some punk trying to scare us. Let's go." But as they dragged Edna toward the back seat, a low rumble began to vibrate the air. It was not a police cruiser. It was the roar of a high-performance engine pushing red line, getting closer, fast. Maddox paused, hand on the car door. He looked down the street. A matte black Ford F-15 O Raptor, lifted and modified, turned the corner at the end of the block. It did not slow down. It roared down the residential street with the terrifying velocity of a missile. "What the?" Maddox muttered. The truck screeched to a halt right behind the cruiser, blocking it in completely. The driver's door flew open before the truck had even fully settled on its suspension. A boot hit the pavement. Major Knox Whittaker stood up. He was 6'4", wearing gym shorts and a tight army green t-shirt that strained against muscles built for war, not for show. He did not have a gun in his hand. He did not need one. The way he walked toward them, balanced, centered, eyes locked on Maddox, was more threatening than any weapon. Maddox put his hand on his holster. "Stay back, police." Knox did not stop. He did not run. He walked with a steady, predatory rhythm. He raised his hand slowly, palms open, showing he was unarmed, but his voice projected with the authority of a man who commanded battalions. "I see you have your hand on your weapon, Officer Maddox," Knox said, his voice carrying clearly to the neighbors and the cameras. "I am unarmed. I am approaching my injured mother. If you draw that weapon, you will regret it for the rest of your very short career." The war was about to begin. Maddox's hand hovered over his Glock. His knuckles were white. In any other situation, against any other civilian, he would have drawn the weapon by now. But something about the man standing 5 feet away stopped him. It was not just the size of Knox Whittaker. It was the stillness. Most people scream when they are angry. They flail. They posture. Knox did none of that. He stood with his feet shoulder-width apart. His hands were open and visible at chest height. His breathing was rhythmic and controlled. His eyes, dark and unblinking, dissected Maddox like a biology student dissecting a frog. "Step back, sir," Maddox yelled, his voice cracking slightly. "This is a crime scene." This is my mother's driveway, Knox corrected, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the humid air. And you have assaulted an elderly woman. I am checking her vitals. If you shoot me, make sure you kill me, officer, because if I survive, you will not like what happens next. Knox knelt. He turned his back on the armed officer, the ultimate display of dismissal. Mom, Knox whispered, his demeanor shifting instantly from warrior to son. He touched her cheek with gentle fingers. Look at me. Breathe. Edna was sobbing quietly now, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the throbbing ache in her shoulder and wrists. My arm, Knox. It hurts so bad. Knox's eyes tracked down to her shoulder. It was slumped forward, the joint clearly dislocated. He saw the bruises blooming on her triceps like dark ink in water. He saw the tight metal cuffs digging into her arthritic wrists. A vein in Knox's temple pulsed once. It was the only sign of the volcanic rage boiling inside him. He had spent many years hunting terrorists in the mountains of Afghanistan and the deserts of Syria. He had kicked down doors to save strangers. And here, in his own hometown, a man with a badge had done this to the woman who taught him to pray. Knox stood up slowly. He turned to face Maddox. Unlock the cuffs, Knox said. It was not a request. She's under arrest, Maddox spat. Assaulting an officer, resisting arrest. My mother has walked with a cane for some time, Knox said, pointing to the hickory stick lying in the grass. You are telling me she assaulted you, a 200-pound man in body armor. She lunged, Maddox lied. The lie tasted sour in the air. Knox looked at Hayes. The rookie was standing by the trunk of the cruiser, looking like he wanted to vomit. Officer Hayes, is it? Knox asked. He did not shout. He spoke to Hayes like a disappointed teacher. I know your father, Bob Hayes, runs the hardware store on Main. Good man. Does he know his son stands by and watches elderly women get tortured? I didn't, Hayes stammered, sweat pouring down his pale face. You are witnessing a felony, Knox said, his voice hard. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. If you do not take those cuffs off her right now and call paramedics, you are an accessory. You will go to federal prison alongside him. Don't listen to him, Hayes, Maddox roared. Call it in. Officer in distress. Get back up. Hayes looked at Maddox, then at Edna, weeping in the dirt. He looked at Knox, who stood like a statue of judgment. The boy in the uniform broke. Hayes stepped forward, fishing for his keys. Trent, I'm taking them off. Her arm is messed up, man. We can't leave her like this. You touch those cuffs, and I write you up for insubordination, Maddox threatened. Write me up then, Hayes muttered. He knelt beside Edna. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry. As the cuffs clicked open, Edna groaned. Her arms fell limp. Knox was there instantly, supporting her weight. Don't move the shoulder, Mom, Knox said gently. We're going to get you to the hospital. But not yet. We need everything documented here first. Maddox had retreated to his radio. He was shouting codes, calling for immediate assistance, claiming a hostile crowd and an aggressive suspect. He was trying to control the narrative. He was trying to bury the truth under a wave of blue lights. Knox pulled his own phone from his pocket. He did not call 911. He did not call the police station. He dialed a number with a Washington, D.C. area code. Robinson, a voice answered on the first ring. It was sharp, clipped. Colonel, Knox said, his eyes never leaving Maddox. I need the protocol initiated. Code black, domestic soil. I have a hostile entity violating the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act and engaging in police brutality against the immediate family of a Tier 1 asset. Location? The colonel asked. No questions about it, are you sure? The colonel knew Knox Whittaker did not bluff. Oak Creek, North Carolina. Officer Trent Maddox. I need JAG. I need the FBI Civil Rights Division, and I need you to call the governor. Sit tight, Sergeant Major. The cavalry is rolling. Do not engage unless lethal force is used against you. Understood, Knox said. But Colonel, if he touches her again, I can't promise I won't turn him into a past tense verb. Understood. ETA on local assets is minutes. Knox hung up. He looked at Maddox, who was now pacing by his car, waiting for his backup. Maddox smirked, thinking the local boys were coming to save him. You think a phone call scares me? Maddox sneered. I own this town, boy. My brother is the chief of police. You just dug your own grave. Knox smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. Officer Maddox, Knox said softly, you're playing checkers. I'm playing chess, and I just took your queen. The sirens began as a wail in the distance, quickly growing into a deafening cacophony. Within minutes, Elm Street was flooded. 3 more Metro Police cruisers skidded to a halt, lights flashing, sirens chirping. 6 officers spilled out, hands on their holsters, adrenaline high. They saw Maddox waving them over. They saw the suspect, Knox, standing over the victim, at least in Maddox's own mind. Get on the ground now! A sergeant shouted, leveling a taser at Knox's chest. The neighbors screamed. Mrs. Hargrove was now crying hysterically on her lawn. The crowd had grown to 20 people, all filming. Knox did not get on the ground. He raised his hand slowly again. I am an active duty serviceman. I am unarmed. My mother requires medical attention. I said get down, the sergeant yelled, stepping closer. Cuff him, Maddox shouted, emboldened by his reinforcements. He threatened to kill me. He obstructed justice. 2 officers rushed Knox. He did not fight them. He let them grab his massive arms. He let them spin him around. He felt the cold steel of handcuffs. For the second time that day, this time on his own wrists. But as they shoved him against the hood of the car, he did not struggle. He just watched the end of the street. You're done, Maddox whispered in Knox's ear as they patted him down. Assault on an officer, terroristic threats. I'm going to make sure you rot in a cell, hero. Knox said calmly, his cheek pressed against the hot metal of the cruiser. That's the moment your life ended. As if on cue, the sound of the local sirens was cut through by a different sound, a deep thumping rhythm that shook the windows of the houses. Whoop, 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 whoop. A black helicopter, bearing no markings other than a tail number, banked low over the neighborhood. The wind from its rotors whipped the trees, sending leaves swirling. It hovered ominously low over the street. Then came the cars. These were not police cruisers. They were black Chevrolet Suburbans, with tinted windows and government plates. 4 of them tore around the corner, ignoring the police barricade, mounting the curb to get around the parked cruisers. They screeched to a halt in a flank formation. Doors flew open. Men in dark suits with earpieces poured out. They moved differently than the cops. They moved with the fluid, lethal efficiency of federal agents. On the back of their jackets, in bold yellow letters, FBI. Behind them, from the lead SUV, stepped a man in a pristine gray suit. He was older, with silver hair and a face carved from granite. He carried a leather briefcase. This was Preston Beaumont, one of the most feared civil rights attorneys in the state. a man who ate police unions for breakfast. And behind him, stepping out of a trailing vehicle, was a man in full Army OCP camouflage, bearing the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. The local cops froze. The sergeant lowered his taser. Maddox's mouth fell open. The lieutenant colonel marched straight toward the police sergeant. "Who is in command here?" I am, sir, Sergeant Baker," the cop stammered. "You certainly do have a situation," the colonel barked. "You have a highly decorated Delta Force operator in handcuffs for checking on his mother. You have federal agents on scene investigating a civil rights violation. And you have about 10 seconds to unhand my soldier before I have the military police dismantle this station brick by brick." Sergeant Baker looked at Knox, then at Maddox. The color drained from his face. "Delta Force, uncuff him. Now!" The officer scrambled to unlock Knox. Knox rubbed his wrists, his expression unchanging. He walked past the stunned police officers and stood next to the colonel. "Report, Sergeant Major," the colonel said. "Subject is Officer Trent Maddox," Knox said, pointing a finger at the man who was now trembling near his patrol car. "Unprovoked assault on a geriatric civilian, excessive force resulting in grievous bodily harm, false imprisonment. And I have reason to believe he falsified the initial probable cause." Preston Beaumont, the lawyer, stepped forward. He did not look at the cops. He looked at the cameras held by the neighbors. He was playing to the court of public opinion already. "Officer Maddox," Beaumont boomed, his voice projecting like a stage actor. "I represent the Whittaker family. I'm serving you with a notice of immediate litigation. Furthermore, these FBI agents are seizing your body camera, your dash camera, and your patrol vehicle as evidence in a federal investigation." Maddox looked around wildly. "You can't do this. I'm a police officer. I have immunity." "Qualified immunity covers mistakes, officer." Beaumont smiled, a shark smelling blood. "It does not cover malice, and it certainly does not cover what I'm going to find on that body cam." It malfunctioned," Maddox stammered, falling back on his old excuse. "It wasn't recording." Knox stepped forward. He pointed up at the modern house across the street, the one Maddox had claimed Edna was casing. "See that?" Knox asked. Maddox looked up. A sleek black sphere hung under the eaves of the modern porch. "That is a 4K omnidirectional security camera," Knox said. "And the owner is standing right there on the lawn streaming the footage to the cloud. We have everything: the approach, the lack of provocation, the throw, the twist, the screams." Knox leaned in close, so only Maddox could hear him. "I told you," Knox whispered. "Hard karma." An FBI agent stepped forward, holding a pair of handcuffs. "Officer Trent Maddox, you are being detained for questioning regarding federal civil rights violations." The silence that followed was heavy. The local cops watched in shock as one of their own was turned around and cuffed by the feds. The click-click was the same sound Edna had heard, but this time it sounded like justice. But the nightmare was not over. As they led Maddox away, Knox turned back to his mother. The paramedics had arrived, but Edna had refused to be moved until she saw her son was free. "Knox," she whispered, her face pale. She slumped. It was all too much. Knox caught her before she hit the ground. Her eyes rolled back. The shock and the pain had been too much for her heart. "Medic!" Knox screamed, a sound of pure terror that the guns and the cops had failed to elicit. "Get over here now!" The twist was not just the arrest. The twist was that the battle was won, but the war for Edna's life was just starting. The fluorescent lights of the ICU waiting room buzzed with a sound that felt like a drill pressing into Knox's skull. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, the universal scent of bad news. Edna Mae Whittaker was stable but fragile. The fall had not just dislocated her shoulder. The shock of the assault had triggered a stress-induced cardiomyopathy, broken heart syndrome. Her heart muscle, stressed beyond its limit by the adrenaline and fear, had stunned itself. She was currently sedated, a symphony of wires and tubes tethering her to this world. Knox stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot of St. Jude's Medical Center. He had not changed clothes. He was still in his gym shorts and tight t-shirt, now stained with the sweat of a day that felt a year long. He looked like a caged tiger, his reflection in the glass dark and brooding. Behind him, Attorney Preston Beaumont, the high-powered attorney, was on a call. His voice was hushed but lethal. "I don't care what the police union rep says, Bob. If they release that statement, I will sue them for defamation before the ink is dry. She's a retired nurse and a church deacon, not a known agitator." Beaumont hung up and walked over to Knox. "They're trying to spin it, Major. The department just released a preliminary press briefing. They aren't admitting fault. They're claiming Officer Maddox was responding to a mental health crisis and that your mother was disoriented and combative due to dementia." Knox did not turn around, his fist clenched against the windowsill until the glass rattled. "She does not have dementia. She does the Sunday crossword in pen." "I know," Beaumont said softly, "but they need a narrative that justifies the force. They're banking on the fact that she's old and black. They think the public will buy the confused, dangerous, elderly woman's story." "They picked the wrong narrative," Knox said, turning around. His eyes were dry, but they burned with a cold, terrifying fire. "And they picked the wrong family." At that moment, Knox's phone buzzed. It was the Colonel. "Turn on the TV, Channel 8. Knox grabbed the remote and flicked on the wall-mounted television. The screen showed the anchorwoman looking grave. The headline at the bottom read, "Exclusive video surfaces of Oak Creek arrest. We warn our viewers, the following images are disturbing." It was the footage from the neighbor's 4K security camera. The angle was perfect. It showed the peaceful Sunday morning. It showed Edna watering her hydrangeas. It showed Maddox's aggressive approach. The audio was crisp. "For what? For watering my flowers?" Then the crunch of the tackle, the scream, the sickening pop of the shoulder. The waiting room went dead silent. A nurse passing by stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Then the video cut to the aftermath. Knox's arrival, the truck blocking the cruiser, the way he stood there calm, hands up, while Maddox shouted lies. The anchorwoman returned, looking visibly shaken. This video, provided to us by a neighbor who wishes to remain anonymous, directly contradicts the statement released by the Metro Police Department minutes ago. We have reached out to Chief Maddox for comment but have received no response. Knox watched the screen. The video had been uploaded to social media simultaneously. The view count was ticking up in real time. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The narrative was not just broken, it was obliterated. "That's the kinetic strike of the information age," Beaumont murmured, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. Public opinion just shifted from wait and see to burn it down. But Knox was not smiling. He was looking at the comments rolling in on the live feed. People were angry. But Knox noticed something else. A comment from a user named Oak Creek Resident 88 caught his eye. Maddox did this to Mr. Ellis last month too, accused him of loitering on his own porch. Ellis moved to Florida the next week, sold his house cheap. Another comment. Same with Mrs. Thompson on Elm. Harassed her until she sold. Who is buying these houses? Knox zoomed in on the screen. The pattern. It was not just racism. It was not just a bad apple cop having a bad day. Beaumont, Knox said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. This was not an arrest, it was an eviction. What do you mean? Maddox is not just a bully, Knox said, his mind shifting into tactical analysis mode. He was connecting the dots, the loitering accusations, the specific targeting of elderly homeowners in a gentrifying neighborhood, the aggressive push to criminalize their existence. He's a cleaner. He's clearing the board. Knox looked at the colonel, who had just walked into the waiting room. Colonel, Knox said, I need intel to run a financial background check on Officer Trent Maddox and his brother the chief, and I need to know who has bought the last 5 properties on Elm Street. The colonel nodded. I'll have the analysts on it. You think this is organized? I think my mother did not get beaten up because she was black, Knox said, his jaw tightening. She got beaten up because her house sits on a double lot and someone wants to build condos there. The investigation room at the FBI field office was quiet, save for the hum of computer servers. Knox was not supposed to be there. Civilian access was strictly prohibited. But when you are a Tier 1 operator and the victim is your mother, rules become guidelines. Agent Torres, the lead FBI investigator, threw a file onto the metal table. It slid across to Knox. You were right, Torres said, looking tired. It's a shell game. Knox opened the file. It was a complex web of LLCs, limited liability companies. The last 6 houses in Oak Creek were purchased by Oakview Development, LLC, Torres explained. They bought them for 30% under market value. The sellers were all elderly residents who had extensive police records that only started a few weeks before they sold. Harassment campaigns, Knox said, reading the file. Maddox hits them with fines, citations, loitering charges, noise complaints. He makes their lives a living hell until they just want to leave. Exactly, Torres nodded. And here's the kicker. Oakview Development LLC is registered in Delaware, but the operating papers trace back to a holding company owned by a man named Victor Lang. Lang? Knox tested the name. Who is he? Local real estate mogul, big donor to the Police Benevolent Association, Torres said. And guess who sits on the board of his charitable foundation? Knox flipped the page. A photo stared back at him. A man in a police dress uniform shaking hands with a slick-looking developer. Chief of Police Roland Maddox, Trent Maddox's older brother. The chief sends his brother to terrorize the homeowners, Knox summarized, his voice flat. The brother creates a criminal record for them, devaluing the property and pressuring them to sell. The developer buys it cheap. The chief gets a kickback, disguised as a donation or a consulting fee. It's a textbook RICO case, Beaumont said from the corner of the room. Racketeering, extortion, wire fraud. This destroys the entire department. We have enough for an indictment on Trent Maddox, Torres said. But the chief, he's insulated. We need a smoking gun to link him directly to the orders. Without that, he claims his brother went rogue and washes his hands of it. Knox stood up. He walked to the whiteboard where the timeline of events was drawn. He stared at the date of his mother's attack. Trent Maddox is a bully, Knox said. And bullies are cowards. He will not do time for his brother. If we squeeze him, he flips. He's in a holding cell, Torres said. Lawyered up, he's not talking. He's not talking to you, Knox corrected, because he thinks his brother can save him. He thinks the blue wall of silence will hold. We need to show him that the wall has already crumbled. Knox turned to the colonel. I need a psychological operation. I need Maddox to believe his brother has already betrayed him. The colonel smiled. It was a cold, military smile. We can arrange a little misinformation. 2 hours later, in the county jail, Trent Maddox sat in the interrogation room. He looked smaller without his uniform. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the jittery fear of a man who knows he is in deep water, but he was still holding on to hope. Roland will fix this, he told himself. Roland runs this town. The door opened. Agent Torres walked in. He did not sit down. He just tossed a piece of paper on the table. It was a transcript. Fake, of course, but Maddox did not know that. What's this? Maddox asked, his voice raspy. That, Torres said, is a statement your brother, Chief Roland Maddox, just gave to the press. He's calling you a disgrace. He says he had no knowledge of your activities. He's announcing an internal review to root out the cancer in the department. You're the cancer, Trent. Maddox read the paper. His hands began to shake. Officer Maddox's actions were the result of his own instability. I have long suspected he was unfit for duty. He's throwing you to the wolves, Trent, Torres said, leaning in. He's going to let you take the fall for the assault, the civil rights violations, the fraud. You're looking at 20 years, easy federal time. You know what they do to cops in federal prison? Maddox looked up. His eyes were wet. The betrayal broke him faster than any physical threat could have. He told me to do it, Maddox whispered. Torres did not react. He just tapped the table. I can't hear you. He told me to do it, Maddox screamed, slamming his fist on the table. Roland! He gave me the list of addresses. He said, shake them up, make them want to leave. He said Lang would cut us in for 10% of the flip. Torres smiled. You want to tell that to the recorder, Trent? You want a deal? I want that son of a in the cell next to me, Maddox hissed. That night, the quiet suburb of Oak Creek saw another convoy of vehicles. But this time, they were not headed for Edna Mae's small bungalow. They were headed for the sprawling gated mansion of Chief Roland Maddox. Knox sat in the passenger seat of the lead FBI SUV. He wore a heavy Kevlar vest over his civilian clothes. He was not armed. He did not need to be, legally liable. But the colonel had insisted he be there to see it. It was part of the healing process. Breach! The radio crackled. The front gate of the mansion was rammed by an armored bearcat. Flashbangs detonated in the front yard to disorient the security dogs. Federal agents, search warrant. Knox watched as the team kicked in the heavy oak doors. He saw the lights flip on inside. He saw Chief Maddox wearing silk pajamas being dragged out onto his manicured lawn in handcuffs. The chief looked up. He saw the FBI agents. He saw the media vans parked down the street. And then he saw Knox. Knox stepped out of the SUV. He walked to the edge of the police tape. He looked down at the man who had orchestrated the terrorizing of his mother. The chief glared at him. You think you won? You're nobody. Knox looked at the chief, then at the moon hanging over the peaceful, sleeping houses of his childhood neighborhood. I'm Edna Mae's son, Knox said simply. And that's enough. As they shoved the chief into the van, Knox's phone rang. It was the hospital. Major Whittaker. It was the doctor. Knox's heart stopped. The victory, the raid, the justice. It all meant nothing if... She's awake, the doctor said. She's asking for you, and she's asking if you remembered to turn off the garden hose. Knox let out a breath he felt he had been holding for hours. He looked at the colonel. "Let's go," Knox said. "I have to go water the hydrangeas." The recovery was slow, measured not in hours, but in the gradual return of color to Edna Mae's cheeks. For some time, Knox did not leave her side. He slept in the uncomfortable vinyl chair next to her hospital bed. His massive frame folded into a shape that defied physics guarding her rest, just as he had guarded high-value assets in war zones. But this asset was priceless. When the day finally came for her discharge, the hospital lobby was not empty. As Knox wheeled Edna out the automatic doors, the bright North Carolina sun made her blink. But it was not just the sun. Lined up along the sidewalk, stretching down the block, were people. There was Mrs. Hargrove holding a Tupperware container of her famous peach cobbler. There was Mr. Ellis, who had flown back from Florida just for this. There were the young couples from the new modern houses holding signs that read, "We stand with Edna." There were veterans from the local VFW standing at attention saluting as Knox pushed the wheelchair. And parked right at the curb was the colonel leaning against the black SUV. He was not wearing his uniform today. He was in a suit, but he still looked like iron. "Your chariot, madam," the colonel said, opening the door. Edna looked at the crowd, her eyes filling with tears. She reached up and touched Knox's hand on her shoulder. "Look at all these people, Knox," she whispered. "I didn't know I had so many friends." "You don't have friends, Mom." Knox smiled, lifting her gently into the car. "You have a battalion." Several months later, the federal courthouse in Raleigh was packed. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat of the crowd. This was the sentencing hearing for United States versus Roland Maddox, Trent Maddox, and Victor Lang. The trial had been a spectacle. The evidence Knox and the FBI had uncovered was overwhelming. The Oakview development scheme was exposed as a multi-million-dollar racketeering operation. They found the emails where Chief Maddox mocked the elderly residents. They found the ledger where Lang recorded the bribes. But the most damning piece of evidence remained that Sunday morning video. It was played on a loop for the jury. The image of Trent Maddox twisting the arm of a weeping grandmother had seared itself into the conscience of the jury. When the judge asked if the victim wanted to make a statement, the courtroom went silent. Knox stood up to help Edna, but she waved him off. She gripped her cane, a new one, polished ebony with a silver handle, and stood up. She walked to the podium slowly, but she did not limp. Her shoulder had healed, but the stiffness remained a permanent reminder. She looked at Trent Maddox. He was pale, gaunt, stripped of his uniform and his arrogance. He could not meet her eyes. "Mr. Maddox," Edna said, her voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone. "You broke my arm. You bruised my ribs. You humiliated me in front of my neighbors." She paused. "But you also did something else. You woke up a sleeping giant. You thought because I was old, I was weak. You thought because I was alone, I was voiceless. You forgot that even the oldest tree has roots that go deep. And if you try to pull it up, you might just bring the whole mountain down on top of you." She looked at the chief, then at Lang. "You three men treated my neighborhood like a game of Monopoly. You treated people like pieces on a board. But God does not like ugly, and He certainly does not like thieves who wear badges." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I do not want revenge. Revenge is for the Lord. I want justice. I want to know that when I water my hydrangeas next Sunday, no one is going to come onto my property and treat me like a criminal. I want to know that the badge means protection, not predation. Edna sat down. The silence lingered for a long time. The judge adjusted his glasses. He looked at the defendants with a gaze that promised no mercy. In my many years on the bench, the judge said, I have rarely seen such a calculated abuse of power. You did not just break the law, you broke the public trust. The gavel came down like a hammer strike. Trent Maddox, 15 years in federal prison for deprivation of rights under color of law and assault. Roland Maddox, 25 years for RICO violations, conspiracy, and wire fraud. Victor Lang, 10 years plus a restitution fine of $15 million to be paid to the victims of his real estate scheme. As the bailiffs led them away in shackles, Trent Maddox looked back one last time. He saw Knox standing tall next to his mother. Knox did not smile. He did not gloat. He just gave a single slow nod. Checkmate. It was a Sunday morning sometime later. The air was crisp, hinting at autumn. The leaves on the great oak tree were turning a burnt orange. Edna Mae Whittaker stepped off her porch. The cane was in her left hand. Her right hand held the garden hose. The street was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was not the silence of fear or emptiness. It was the peaceful silence of a neighborhood at rest. The for sale signs that had plagued the street were gone. The new families waved as they drove by. Mr. Ellis had moved back into his house 3 doors down, using the settlement money from the lawsuit to fix up his roof. A matte black truck pulled into the driveway. Knox hopped out, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He carried a bag of groceries. "Morning, Mom," he called out. "Morning, Knox." She smiled, spraying a fine mist over her hydrangeas, which were blooming bigger and bluer than ever before. Knox walked up the driveway. He stopped at the spot where the concrete was still slightly discolored from where Edna's blood had fallen. He stared at it for a moment. The memory flashed. The cuffs, the scream, the rage. "You okay?" Edna asked, noticing his pause. Knox looked up at her. The rage was gone. The soldier was at rest. "Yeah, Mom," he said, walking over and kissing her on the cheek. "I'm good. Just admiring the flowers." "They need water," Edna said, turning the nozzle. "They need strong roots to survive the heat." "They have strong roots," Knox said, putting his arm around her small shoulders. "The strongest I know." From down the street, a police cruiser turned the corner. It was a new officer, a young woman. She slowed down as she passed the house. She rolled down the window, smiled, and gave a respectful wave. Edna waved back. "See," Edna said, turning back to her son. "Not all of them are bad, Knox. We just had to weed out the garden." Knox laughed, a deep, genuine sound that echoed in the morning air. "Yes, Mom," he said. "The garden looks perfect now." The water from the hose caught the sunlight, creating a small fleeting rainbow over the driveway. It was a bridge of light over the place where the darkness had tried to win and failed. That day in Oak Creek proved that true strength is not found in a badge, a gun, or a bank account. It is found in the love of a son for his mother and the courage of a woman who refused to stay down. Officer Maddox thought he was fighting an old lady. He did not realize he was fighting an entire army. Justice might be blind, but sometimes it has Delta Force on its side. If you believe that karma always comes for those who abuse their power, and you stand with mothers like Edna everywhere, hit that like button. Share this story to remind everyone that no one is above the law. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served.